Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and today is a very special episode of Reiki Radio. First of all, you know that we usually have new episodes air on Mondays, but I wanted to make sure that this episode came out just in case any of you are interested in working with one of my teachers online on July 1st. So I had an opportunity to sit down with my teacher, Frans Stiene, and it really wasn't as much of an interview as much as you'll find. It's just me having a conversation with my teacher that happens to be recorded that all of you get to tune in and listen to. And I am so thankful for all of the insights that he shared. I'm sure, just like me, you will learn a lot from this episode. So, as I mentioned, Frans is hosting an online course on July 1st. It is not a Reiki training and certification course, but it will expose you to some Reiki practices. So, if you want to join, be sure to visit his website, the International House of Reiki, at ihreiki.com. And the link, of course, will be down in the show description. But before I get into all of that, I just want to make sure that some of you know a bit of Frans's background before we get into this conversation. Although he is trained as a Jendai Reiki Ho Shihan and a Komyo Reiki Shihan, he prefers to teach a traditional form of Japanese Reiki that he feels and reflects a desire to bring the teachings back to the very source, Usui Reiki Roho. The contents of what Frans teaches is formed by what has been practiced in Japan since the early 1900s, long before the system of Reiki left Japan, and the researched influences on the system. So you will hear us discuss as well his work that he does with his teacher that is ongoing, and he goes to Japan to study with a Reiki priest. So the particular method that he teaches includes physical and energy enhancing exercises to help practitioners delve deeper into their Reiki practice. The earlier teachings considered the system not just to be hands-on healing practice, but one that also focuses on a student's spiritual path. So Frans is based in Holland, but he also teaches in North America, Europe, the UK, Australia, and Asia. And he is the author of The Inner Heart of Reiki, The Way of Reiki, The Inner Teachings of Mikao Usui, and Reiki Insights. So these books will help you to take your practice to a deeper level. And we do talk a little bit more about that. So I really hope that you all enjoy this episode. Again, if you want to learn more about Frans and his work, the link is below, and I will see you on the other side. I'm just so giddy. I'm so thankful to have you here today, Frans, to have this conversation with you. It's been a while. And in following you, I see you've been bouncing around the world. So thank you for taking time to come and chat with me today.
Absolutely delighted. Good to see you again.
Yes, it's so good to see you too. And I know we've had several conversations over the years. We even met through the podcast, in fact. And we've had a lot of conversations about Reiki and your point of view. And of course, that'll come up in conversation. But one of the things I've always been so curious about with you that I wanted to ask is, you know how a lot of times when we come into these practices, we tend to sometimes go through a phase of feeling like it's separate from our regular life. And you always post living, right? So you are practicing Reiki, obviously, you teach it, but you also show that life is full of joy and all of these things. So I wanted to ask you about that for you personally, what it means to be in like a constant state of practice or expression so people don't feel like it's a separate thing.
Yeah, I think this is a big thing in many practices, no matter if it's Reiki or yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong. It's almost where we see it as very separate. So we do something in the morning, and then we go and lead our life, and we actually completely forget about the practice. So therefore, so it's very difficult then for that continuation to happen.
Right.
And for me, actually, and this is so beautiful in the precepts, we see in the precepts, it says today. So it doesn't say on the yoga mat or on your meditation pillow or on your Reiki table. It says today, so that we have to bring it with us in all we do. And of course, not always easy, because we get triggered out there or on the street in the world. And but I think also what is very important to be able to really bring it into the world, we definitely have to sit on a meditation pillow.
Yeah.
So the more we embody it, and I like that too, when we look at the word embodiment, it doesn't say enheadment, right?
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean just in our head, but actually from our whole body. Also doesn't say out of the body, right? So we always carry our body with us wherever we go. So therefore, the more we embody what we're actually talking about, or embody the precepts in our daily life, then slowly, slowly, we really start to take it with us in all we do. And for me, that is then an expression of being Reiki. And when we do this also, then our practice start to really blossom. Actually, I was just having an online session with a student, and who's really going good in his practice. And he was actually saying that, one thing what I notice now is that I am more um, bringing these practices in my daily life. He said, I notice I'm actually kinder to people when I go out on the street or at my work or in the supermarket. I pick up things quicker from the street, what I normally haven't done. And so for me, this is also a great sign that we're progressing well within the system of Reiki, within our practice.
I'm so glad you say that, Franz, because it brings to mind how a lot of us also come into this work, whether there's a catalyst for us personally, where we're like, I need healing, which is, the system of Reiki is incredible for our personal work. But then sometimes we develop this pressure of, I want to be a good practitioner, I want to be good in session. So a lot of
Yeah.
people have this direction of mind that it's just about, how do I get the techniques down for session? How do I
Yeah.
get these things down so people come and they feel like something happened to them? But you point out the way that these practices then change how we experience our lives. So I just wanted to kind of play with the idea of both, because could you talk about how, even for you, did you know from the beginning, I have to be so diligent with the on the mat practice, so to speak, before you recognized how it cracked you open? Like, were you always this diligent in your practice?
I'm not sure if I was diligent in my practice, but I do have, um, how we all have different traits. And one of my traits is that if I focus on something, I really, it's almost an addiction in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And you know what? It feels so good. And the more we do it, the more we practice, then we can feel this goodness, this juice, this openness, this expandedness. And it doesn't mean that not shitty things are not happening, but shitty things do still happen. But the way we then deal with it becomes very, very different.
Right.
And for me also, I see when we just focus on the technique of hands-on healing, then we limit ourselves. But because the more we bring it in our daily life, then what means actually we're practicing more. And the more, therefore, we practice, then when we do hands-on healing, that effect will be very, very different.
Right.
So if we only do like a little short meditation practice of 20 minutes in the morning, but then forget to bring it in our daily life, or we do 20 minutes in the morning and then we bring it in our daily life, then of course, the next time we do a meditation practice, there is so much more continuation. There's so much more oomph to it. And therefore, when we then start to do hands-on healing, that openness, that spaciousness, that state of mind, what Mikao so beautiful point out all the time, really we can bring with us into our hands-on healing session, and then the hands-on healing session amplifies that again, and so then that we can take with us again in our daily life. So
Yeah.
it's mutual supporting each other.
Yeah. And it's very, very interesting, I think, when we do come to that place of coming out of the ideas of what we think practice is supposed to be, or even what we're supposed to be like, and
Yeah.
then just really give ourselves that space to observe what happens. You just reminded me the last time I got to sit with you, I guess was about a year and a half ago now, almost 2 years ago. And after those 5 days, I remember coming home and just feeling different, you know?
Yeah.
And like it just felt this lightness of my body, my being, my space. And it occurred to me, even though I practice away from, coming to class, there was something about even that immersion and taking that time to really just focus on that. The shift that it created helped me appreciate even the more subtle when I can't spend 5 days with my teacher. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think therefore these retreats or people coming to reach it, the Shimpan and Reiki 3 classes or those kind of elements is so important because again, it's like, I mean, I'm still practicing. I went to my teacher in last November, really integrating and practicing because it's so essential that we keep practicing, that we keep having teachers and connecting with our teachers, because I think it's not just important from the space of teaching or hands-on healing, but for our daily life.
Right.
And for me, when we really look at the system of Reiki, it's all about our daily life. Hands-on healing is a tiny, small part of the whole situation. And therefore, again, when we look at the precepts, it doesn't even talk about hands-on healing. It's really a state of mind, what we then can bring with us in our daily life. And if you look at very traditional in Japan, also, for example, these teachers, when they go into the mountains, that is when they start to really work on themselves, to have the right mindset. And when they come down to the mountains, they're going to bring that mindset into their daily lives. So we can really see this as a very normal aspect in many Japanese spiritual traditions.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad you bring this up because that's another thing too. A lot of times we get caught in the trap of thinking like I take a class and then I'm done. Like
Yeah.
the end, it's over. And even for you, you're an incredible teacher. I can say from personal experience, you really are. But I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that you still train with your teacher. I mean, for several years, you have been
Yeah.
training with your teacher, who is a priest, I believe, a Japanese priest. Yeah. But from the way that you describe your training, it's very, I would say, rigorous.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what? So could you also share a little bit about why, going intentionally, I think, into spaces of discomfort
Yeah.
can also be so helpful for us to like be honest about like where we may need to break open a little more.
Yeah, I think you say this very beautifully. You know, sometimes like my teacher belongs to these tradition, very traditional in Japan. His teacher was one of the most famous marathon monks in Japan, Sakai Dayajari, and that tradition is really saying, okay, you come here, you're teaching, so you're already a teacher. Now let me see if you do get angry, if you do get worried. Let me press those buttons, and then if you do get angry or worried, then we can work with it, you know?
Right.
So I think sometimes I don't go there always like, yoo-hoo, I'm going to Japan and meet my teacher. We're like, shit. So I really have to kick myself in the butt to go there because it's
Yeah.
super challenging. It's super tough. You start very early in the morning till late at night. They push you. But at the same time, afterwards, you know, you're really glad you did it because it's so transformative, and you can really see your own shortcomings, what I still have many to deal with. And then also in that way, also it helps me to become a better teacher and hopefully be more open and compassionate in my daily life.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say because I notice since practicing, sometimes when we're in whatever our pattern is, we don't recognize it as a problem. We just,
Yeah,
we may be defensive because we think we can justify it or all of these things. And it's interesting when you do start to recognize, like, okay, if I don't get defensive and I don't push back and I sit with what's making me uncomfortable, there's just so much we get to understand about ourselves that
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
just it's almost strange in a way. Like
Yeah.
it's like these hidden little pieces of ourselves. Like how could we be so blind to them, so to speak, until you're pushed?
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is it. So we're so blind to it. Uh, for a long time, when I started to practice, I thought we had these blinkers on like this. And then I had certain insights and realizations like, no, we're not like this. We walk around like this. We don't
Yeah,
even see it. And in Japanese, there's a wonderful phrase. Sometimes we're so ignorant that we don't know we're ignorant.
yeah, yeah,
But when we sit in, and therefore also like my teachers also, they say, one of the things is that we can be patient, right? If something happens, that instead of really quickly getting irritated, blaming other people, getting angry, getting worried, that we can take a deep breath and then reflect on, why do I get irritated? Why do I want to blame that person? Why do I get worried? Why do I get angry? And then actually reflect on that and feel it within you so that you can soften it, and can learn from it.
right. Well, you remind me of because this is actually something I want to ask you about because again, I know that you go to Japan and it's intentionally in a lot of ways going to put you in a space of discomfort. Whereas here, say like in Reiki classes, I don't know, maybe there's some aspect that may make someone
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but generally it's a
No.
warm and fuzzy place, I
Yeah.
mean, and even your classes on the surface are a lot of fun. I mean, because you just bring this this lightness and it's a lot of fun. However, I remember I think every time that I've come to class with you, the chanting has a very interesting effect on me. But this
Mm.
last time, I remember feeling discomfort starting to erupt in my body. And
Yeah.
where you just feel like something is shifting. And so I tried to reposition and maybe my posture was off, right? And so then I'm like, no, my posture is okay. And instead of repressing it, I was just like, okay, F it, just well, let it go and see what happens. And tears started to come out. And then I had to try to not focus on the fact that tears were coming out of my eyes, but staying with my mind in the hara and
Yeah.
directed on the chanting and the sounds. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Like, are there certain elements that you're aware of within the system of Reiki that if your students really do let go, so to speak, that it can also be these things that push us, maybe not in the most obvious
Yeah.
way, but
Absolutely. I mean, that is it. When we start to work on ourselves
mm,
with our body, our breath, and our mind, then we start to see things. We start to notice things,
yeah,
maybe what we previous have not noticed. So I see it sometimes a little bit like this glass of water. We all have mud, right? We all have some issues in our upbringing, life, schooling, education. We all have whatever. And normally, I'm not shaking it up, but normally we constantly are busy in our mind. So we're constantly shaking this up. And then the mud comes to the surface all the time.
mm,
And because the mud starts to swirl through the glass, I can't see it clearly. I can't
mm,
see things clearly. But when I settle, when I quieten my mind, I focus on a mantra or the breathing or hand positions, then I still my mind, and therefore the mud slowly goes down all by itself. And then this becomes clearer. And suddenly we start to see, oh shit, I do get worried a lot.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I do get angry a lot. What the hell? Or I do have this pain, or I do have this addiction, or I do have these quirky things within me.
Yeah.
So, and then we can really start to work with them. And sometimes, of course, that is not always comfortable. And therefore, so important that we first learn how to ground and center ourselves. So, for example, one of the first meditations we learn in the system of Reiki is Joshin Kokiho, breathing into the hara, and is like becoming like the weeble wobble, right? Very stable. The weeble falls over but comes back again. And if we stay like the weeble wobble and really focused and grounded and centered, and when these things come up, we can look at them without getting worried or upset or anxious. And therefore, the meditations like Joshin Kokiho are so important when we want to really start to go deeper into our own personal meditation practice and the system of Reiki.
Yeah. That's funny you bring this up. There's someone that I met, I guess it was the end of last year, and we had I had an online, it was kind of like a going through Reiki practices, not a Reiki class, but doing things like Joshin Kokiho.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who came, who now he comes to your meditations as well, he was just, his mind was blown just from that one practice. And I heard from him recently, and he told me, like, it's that simple meditation, not so, it's amazing how much it's changed his practice, changed his life,
Yeah.
changed his awareness, all these things. But these different elements, I think a lot of times we don't recognize how much they take us deeper into not just understanding ourselves, but understanding what Reiki, the system of Reiki, really
Yeah,
is pointing to. And if we don't
absolutely.
apply, oh man, it's just like sometimes it's like if you just trust it and try it out, like it's crazy what you may encounter on a very personal level.
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to mention your books because I've told you this before, but when I first started practicing Reiki, it was that I thought I just needed to understand the techniques, but I wasn't letting the techniques crack me open because I was just in my head, you know?
Yeah. I
And
think
then, yeah,
that's a thing, unfortunately, what we see these days. Yeah, a lot of it is in our head, also a
right.
lot maybe historical stuff, but
Yes,
like actually letting these practices crack us open is the most important element.
right. Well, so then I finally did. I would say it was probably more accidental than intentional. I didn't, but it started to. But then what I started to experience was so much different than the framework of just what I learned in class. So
Yeah.
I always tell everyone, your book that I first encountered was The Inner Heart of Reiki. And it literally was like, oh my goodness, it's the system is so much more than I understood it to be. But I only started to realize what you put into words so beautifully through my practice. And it was the letting go. Like, stop trying so hard and just I had to become an observer of what's happening when I'm laying my hands instead of thinking about getting it right. Like, what am I actually experiencing when this happens? And, so on and so forth. So, I wanted to ask you with that, like, in your personal ways of practicing, like, do you notice that there's this continual, like, whoa, are you still sometimes kind of blown away by what you experience in connection to Reiki practice?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was having an online session with a student this morning and we're doing some practice and I go like, holy shit,
Yeah,
like for myself. And
right.
again, it's so difficult to word. And then afterwards I had to go into town. I was walking into town and just a whole different perception again.
Yeah,
And you've not always, of course, in the beginning, but I've been doing this now for almost more than 25 years. So when we keep practicing, you start to feel so much more open. Life becomes a bit easier. Doesn't mean that there's no shit, but the way we react to the stuff, what comes our way, becomes so much easier, you know, like easier to deal with obstacles, what we encounter, or like, for example, my mom is not doing so well. She's 86. So, you know, maybe in the past I would have been really upset. And now I can deal with it in a very open, quiet, caring, loving way. What maybe in the past I wouldn't be able to do it.
Mhm.
And so you can really see for myself also that integration into my daily life. I had Tibetan friends coming to stay for 8 days last year, and they live in Darjeeling in India. And I hadn't seen them for 27 years.
Wow.
And I don't like to say this, but I think it was the most beautiful um, feedback. I'm still feeling emotional about it. Mm, someone had ever given to me, because I met them when I was just starting to practice Reiki, and they are Tibetans, involved already for many, many, many years in Tibetan Buddhism. And we were walking in the street, and then I took them out for dinner, and we're sitting there, and Pemba, my friend, he goes, "Frans, you're really practicing Dharma into your daily life." And it touched me so deep. And I go like, yes, this is actually what also Reiki is. It's in our daily life. It's we cannot just say it's on a massage table. And I think these days, particularly, it's so important, because if we look at how the world is going these days, it's not
Yeah.
always a good place, right? And therefore, we need to be really finding, first of all, this inner peace within ourselves. If we want to have peace in the world, and Thich Nhat Hanh says that so beautifully, peace is not something we hope for, but peace is what we have to practice right now.
Right.
And this is in a way the same. And Mikao, if you look at the precepts, it's all about peace, right? The peace of mind. And he doesn't say in 10 years' time, or let's hope for peace. No, he said today be peaceful. And this for me is really the core of the whole system of Reiki. And this is the base also for hands-on healing.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I see what you post. So, like say on Instagram, and you do. I mean, you post again, living your life joyfully. And it's interesting because I translate it as like, oh, he's showing other aspects of being in his practice. I mean, it's not, again, just on the mat, but allowing yourself to have joy-filled times and connections with friends and all of the things that you do. And you always include beautiful quotes. So I want to ask you about that in a second. But with what you just said, I have to ask you about gratitude because I've been thinking about this a lot and how, especially because it's part of the precepts. And I noticed that a lot of times we have resistance to that
Mm.
because of what's going on in the world. So a lot of people feel almost like feeling duty to not feel grateful or feeling guilt for
Yeah.
being, you know, displaying joy or gratitude or whatever this may be. Just wanted to ask you about that. I mean, did you ever have a challenge or like a tug of war with the idea of gratefulness, and how do you really accept it in the ways that you do?
Yeah, again, I think we need to really bring it inwards. Like, so often we see gratefulness, a beautiful day, like a nice weather, or someone gives us something, or we're grateful for a lot of external things.
Right.
And so in the beginning, I was also like this. And then through practice, I realized, well, the first thing actually we have to be grateful of is waking up every morning, like that we can take a breath. We would, of course, we're breathing through the night, but that we
Yeah,
wake up and we take this breath and we go, I'm grateful actually to be alive. I'm
right.
grateful to be in this body, and I'm grateful to have this body. And so it's really, first of all, that physicality of being here and being okay with our physicality, with our body, who we are, how we look like. And that then emanates through many other aspects of being grateful, and then also being grateful for the things what don't go so well,
Yeah.
because they actually perfect life lessons so that we can actually work with them. And this also in the beginning is very difficult, because in the beginning we're only grateful for the good things, but then actually we need to also be grateful for the bad things. And as you say, I think also sometimes people find it very difficult that to see another person happy or joyful or playful. Oh, because there's so much sorrow in the world. I think, in effect, a lot of this is also jealousy. Yeah? I
Mm.
would like to be like this, but I don't know how to be like this. And so for me also, this comes back again to realizing this inner great bright light. And Mikao talks about this wonderful great bright light. And today is a beautiful day here. It's sunny, and the sunlight reflects. I'm on the 11th floor on all the roofs, and there's a lot of these glittery things on the roof, like these fans, and you see it all sparkling. So the light is playing. I was on the beach yesterday, and the light is playing on the water. So the quality of light is already playfulness, is joyfulness. And so the more that we tap into our true nature in this great bright light, there will be a lightness of being,
Yeah.
right?
I love that the quality of light is playful. Now I feel like I'll never look at it the same. Just saying that's a really beautiful thought. And it's interesting too, because as you're saying what you're saying, it also reminds me that I think the idea of gratitude in a lot of ways pushes us into discomfort that, what we
Yeah.
were talking about before. And I think it can reveal a lot of what our stories are. So,
Yeah.
like, for your example, that's part of my practice. I wake up and, like, one of my first things is to just be like, wow, okay. And I'm just the idea of I want, to have just openness in the day. Like, always just let me be open, whatever I encounter, right? But I could imagine someone hearing like, oh, I'm grateful for this body, and their mind's automatically going to, but I have problems. My back hurts, my knees hurt, da 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 da. So I think even it's interesting how the idea of something that's so loving, gratitude, could also actually be very kind of like one of the buttons that
Yeah.
reveals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why it's so good to actually meditate on the precepts,
Yeah,
to really taste them and not just, read them 3 times and go like, okay, that's done, on to the
right,
next, but actually really embodiment, again, integrate them, think about it, focus on what does it mean for me to be grateful?
right.
Why am I not being grateful? Oh, because I got pain here or pain there. What does that mean, this pain? Uh, all of these things is such an important teaching for a practice, because the more I'm being grateful, actually, I become more and more open-minded.
Mhm.
And the more I'm open-minded, then that energy can really start to flow. If I'm holding on tight to anger and frustration and fear, not being grateful, then my energy is not flowing like it should be. Therefore, actually, we're getting more and more sick.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I want to go back to even the thing I was saying that you always include these very interesting quotes because it brings to mind again your direction of mind.
Yeah.
And I I mean, it could be totally wrong. Who knows what you really do in life? But from what you post, it looks like, you know, you tend to focus a lot on what we would consider traditional practice. But even
Yeah.
outside of that, you seem to spend a lot of time again uh, cultivating like these experiences of joy in exchange for yourself. But then you clearly also spend a lot of time reading. And
Yes.
you will post, different quotes of what you found useful or, would be insightful for us all. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that. It seems like that alone, like this directing your mind intentionally, not necessarily getting caught up in other things. You focus on things that really kind of keep you on your practice through other avenues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, for me, I like, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I like books from teachers who have very direct experience of their clear, true nature.
right,
And so, therefore, I need to look at Zen masters or Tibetan masters or Chinese masters who really have dedicated their life to practice. And for me, when I read this, it's just so clear. Their writing is so clear. and their writing is also consistent, right? It's not that on one page they say this and the next chapter you go like, yeah, but they were saying something different in that doesn't match.
Yeah.
So I have in my bookshelf a lot of these books from these teachers, and I really, when I read them, I write down these quotes or I mark them, for myself, because then a lot of times when I read them, I feel very focused. So it's almost like a meditation
Mm.
practice. And then I can really feel that almost also in my mind body energy, what I'm reading. And so to read it again and again and again, maybe from different words, from different teachers. And yet, the most beautiful thing is, if you look at these different traditions I just called out, then you can actually see that they all pointing out the same thing, just in slightly different ways or different words due to their maybe cultural habit or
Right.
different languages. And yet they all say the same thing. And this is the beauty, what I found so fascinating. And so, because I find it very helpful, I want to put these quotes out on a daily basis on social media or on the key campus of my website. And hopefully, then maybe someone else finds it beneficial and can get some insights from it.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you were saying that you read and it's, like a meditative practice of sorts, it kind of brought to mind that these quotes that you post, I mean, they literally are, I guess, like another variation of the precepts.
Yeah,
And instead of just reading them, as you say, and just being like, oh, okay, that was interesting, it's something that you really take in and embody and reflect on of how does
yeah.
this show up in my life? How am I in relationship to whatever this idea may be? You're really interesting, Franz. I get asked a lot. I have to tell you, I get asked a lot, what are you like?
I surprise a lot of people.
Yes, yes. Like, listen, I mean, if you go to one of his classes, you know what you are? You are like the embodiment in a lot of ways of firm and flexible. That's really what you're like, because there is, when you do talk about certain things, as we're talking now, there is this
Yeah,
air of your mind is very directed, clear, kind of like sturdy, serious, the firmness, right? And you can get that and feel that when you're talking about dedication
mm,
to our practice and being very, devoted to that. But then there's this flexibility with you. Again, like I always say, I'm like, he's like probably one of the most playful people I've ever met in my life. Like, so you have this beautiful blend of um, being an expression of firm and flexible. I just have
thanks.
to tell you, I get asked all the time, what is he like?
Yeah, it's quite funny because I just went out to this music festival, or I mean, a music DJ thing, and
Yeah.
it's kind of new here, and it starts like at 7:30 in the evening till midnight. So it's
Yeah.
like early dancing. I love dancing. And so there were some new friends and some old friends who were all going. And then behind the DJ was a little ledge. And so I was standing close to the DJ, and he had like a helper who was getting everybody moving. And so the guy, he picked me up and he puts me on this little ledge. So there I'm standing by myself on this little ledge dancing. And then, like younger people were pulled in, and then and then some other people. So like friends of these friends. So you teach meditation, like Ray. Are you sure?
You're allowed to be fun. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things about you I think is so great, because I think we have this idea as well that, if you are someone who has a focus, there is an air of seriousness that can come with that. But I think, for example, it just came to mind one time many years ago, I went to go hear the Dalai Lama speak. He came to a university in LA. And I don't know what I expected other than seriousness. I mean, he's a monk, like, oh, I don't know, Dalai Lama. It's gonna be, you know, he was hilarious. I
Yeah.
mean, hilarious. He cracked jokes. You got both again, like that blend of yes, he feels very grounded in himself, but
Yeah.
also there was like this levity and this open-heartedness. Both were existing at the same time.
Yeah, I think those people, for me, the Dalai Lama is a great example. When I lived in Darjeeling in India for a year, I visited a lot of Tibetan Buddhist temples. Man, and it was just such an eye-opening for me that they were, and then suddenly they were super playful and laughing, and I go like, wow, this is wonderful because we
Yeah.
have both in life, right?
Right.
It's not just, and I think this is also a mistake what we make, that spirituality needs to be serious. But for me, it's actually, it needs to be life, and life is playful, like that light, like it's, and like the Dalai Lama, he shows this so wonderfully. And I think therefore we can really see this also in really good teachers who have embodied this,
Yes.
that beautiful balance between super focus and at the same time expressing, and we all do this of course in a different way, their joyful playfulness. And the first time I trained with a Taoist teacher for 12 years, a female teacher, and she lived in Australia. She was Chinese, came from a very traditional Chinese background. Taoist, was brought up already from the age of 3 in
Mm.
his Taoist practices. And the first time I started to teach overseas, and I came back and said, Frans, did you have fun? I said, yeah, I went to a museum and I went to this. I said, no, no, no. Did you had fun in the class? And I go, yeah, I think I did. I stood on a chair, made a joke, and like this and this and this. And she said, okay, make sure you keep doing this. And I go, why are you saying this? And she said, and this is her words. Unfortunately, she passed away. She was one of my most amazing teachers. And she said, specifically men, when they start to go deeper into these spiritual practices, they become too serious, and then it becomes an obstacle
Mm.
because they become actually more like this than actually this playfulness. He said, make sure that you keep this in your way, right, into your daily life. And luckily, I've was raised a little bit like this, so I've already is part of who I am.
Mhm.
But yeah, really making sure, because sometimes we do get too serious in that, and then it's too tight. Huh? We become like this. Now it's and then we cannot enjoy life anymore.
Yeah.
And this is a bit sad in a way.
Well, it's interesting because you say that, and it points right back to the spaciousness
Hmm.
that always
Yeah,
comes up, in Reiki and what you teach. I mean, how can you really allow that spaciousness if you're not, in my mind, I'm thinking of like breathing, like just like, there has to be openness and yes. And there's a joyfulness in that. Like there's this
absolutely.
feeling of just, awe and beauty and joy in feeling that spaciousness. But you bring up another good point with thinking of who you are. I think it kind of answers that question again about the gratitude that I was curious about, because in that firmness and in that flexibility, I think we can also kind of see that how we can be in the world where there's a lot of sadness, but at the same time, again, love can be present and exist. And I think a
Absolutely.
lot of times we think it has to be one or the other. And if there's sadness, then I must match that. I must
Yeah,
show that I am aware that this exists, when actually like we're all craving for love to be more of what is expanded.
absolutely. I think also, I mean, for me, when we feel this sadness, like for example, the other day I was doing a treatment on someone and she's a lot of caught up at the moment. And then in a way, it makes me sad. But at the same time, then that sadness helps me to be more compassionate to the
Right.
person. And therefore that sadness helps me to be in this really open space. That open space is more compassionate than like this, and
Yes.
so they all blend together in a beautiful play. But therefore that openness is so important, because if we are not really that open-minded and we encounter sadness, then we let it actually influence us a lot. And then we start to be caught up in the sadness of other people, or caught up in the sadness of the world. And then it becomes very difficult to help other people, because we now have been caught up in sadness, right? And then very difficult now to help other people. Oh no, poor me, like this, poor world, suffering, blah, blah, blah. But if I, in this openness, right, then this sadness comes in, and we can feel it and we can sense it, but we don't grab it. And
Right.
now from this open space, I can actually say, oh, let me do this for you in a very kind and compassionate way. So it's a beautiful dance for me also between those three.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful because it's funny. Everything you're saying points right back to, I feel like I'm sitting in class with you, points right back to interconnectedness, right? And again, this idea that we do kind of see things as so separate. I mean, from every level of life, we see everything as separate, and we try to um, categorize and judge and all these things. But just hearing you say, I think probably light bulbs will go off for a lot of people that, inviting that sadness into a space of compassion
Yeah.
so that it can then have the room and the spaciousness to not only be recognized, but also the quality of it changes when we don't, like, taking the charge out of it. Like, it doesn't become this hard, stuck thing. And it always just comes back to our mind and how we interact with
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I think you hit the hammer on the nail here. It all comes back to our own mind, huh? And
Mm-hmm.
this is so important. And again, this is why we see in the precepts, they're hanging behind me in Japanese. It's all about the mind,
Yes.
and a lot of the mantras and symbols point to a state of mind. Even the Japanese meditation practices, Joshin Kokyoho, means pure mind through breathing in and out. I
Yeah.
mean, like, it's just Mikasu, it keeps throwing it in our face, and somehow we seem to ignore it
Right.
all
And
the time. And we think it's about the energy, but actually it's the mind, eh? And the energy follows our mind.
yeah.
So really important for practices, if we want to live in a more peaceful world, to really look at our own mind and see what is it doing, how do we get triggered, how can we soften this, so that we actually, yeah, stay more and more in this open spaciousness. And the quality of this open spaciousness, of course, is compassion and kindness and love.
Right.
Mm.
And you just brought us full circle, like right back to the beginning of where we started of, I think it's important for people to know that leaning into our discomfort, if we do it with the love and compassion, then
Yeah,
it can be done. But of course, it has to start with the mind and that willingness, that openness, that allowance. Um, I think that's has to be one of the main things I've learned from having you as a teacher is that it's not just about the energy, but it
yeah,
really is, at the base of it all, this openness of mind and heart. Like,
yeah,
and this willingness to not attach to our stories, our ideas, our suffering, whatever it may be, but also being very open to that compassion. And I think when I think of you too, like probably the word and highlight is always interconnectedness. So
yeah,
even that makes me more curious of, instead of seeing myself as separate from anything, especially those things that make me uncomfortable,
yeah,
how am I in relationship to rather than separate
absolutely.
from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think really seeing that interconnectedness already exists. Eh? It's
Right.
already right here. But because, as you say, that's so beautiful, also we get so caught up in our stories,
Hmm.
and particularly the stories, I, me, mine,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
this is my story, and this is how I want it, and like this. And then we cannot see this interconnectedness. It's like going to the movies, and we get caught up in the movies, sometimes a drama, sometimes horror, sometimes romantic, sometimes action, but we cannot see that beautiful white screen behind it. And yet it's always there, and that
Right.
beautiful white screen is connected to all of it. But because we get so caught up in these stories, we don't see it. So when we slow down, you know, in the old days when a movie slowed down, the little movie started to burn,
Yes,
and then
yes.
you started to see the white screen. It's a little
Yeah.
bit like this. So suddenly we slow down, and we slow down through hands-on healing, focusing with the meditation practices, the mantras, breathing, etc. And then suddenly we start to see, oh, geez, we actually are interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. And I have to tell you, I know we're running out of time and there's a few more things I hope that you'll share with everyone. I have to tell you though, I'm very thankful to have come across you, your work. I always tell everyone how thankful I am to have found you as a teacher, but want to make sure I tell you directly if I never have before. I appreciate you very much. And I'm glad that we had this conversation because it feels like I don't feel like I wasn't interviewing you. I feel like I just got to have a conversation with my teacher that other
Yeah.
people will just get to listen to. So
Yeah,
thank
I think
you.
that's the beauty of I think also our relationship, how
Yeah.
we work together, you know, and I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to ask about because I know other people have opportunities to work with you, even though you are international and you travel everywhere. We can also work with you online, and some of the practices that we mentioned, people can work with you and experience all of this. So could you tell us a little bit about what you are offering and how we can work with you now?
Yeah, so you can look on my website, ihreiki.com, and we do have virtual practice evenings twice a month. I do, for example, soon in July, I have a What is Reiki online live event for 7 days, an hour a day. So I do those kind of elements, what I really like. And then, of course, traveling the world, teaching in America, Australia, Europe. I like that. I like also community.
Yes.
So sharing it and creating wonderful communities. As you say, daily quotes and stuff on Instagram and Facebook. I enjoy that, doing that too as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to make sure I have the date for July so that I do make sure this is posted before in case anyone's like, wait, I want to go to
Okay,
that.
it's
Do
pretty
you know?
soon. It's pretty soon. It's
Okay.
on the 1st of July.
On the 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we're going to have to post this right away. I also just want to let everyone know, again, the book that introduced me to Franz's work was In Our Heart of Reiki. I can't tell you, like, this holds such a deep place in my heart. And you have other incredible books as well. I saw that this book, The Way of Reiki, has recently been translated into other languages. I mean, you're really
Yeah, so
everywhere.
yeah, so it's in French and Dutch now, and hopefully we're working on Italian at the moment. So
Wow.
fingers crossed for more. Yeah, fantastic.
Can I ask you, when people translate the books, I was curious about this. Do you ever have to find other ways of describing certain elements of the work so that it translates appropriately, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that is tricky sometimes. It
Yeah.
depends on the translator, and like I don't speak Italian or
Yeah,
French,
yeah.
so then you just have to trust and hope that the translators did a good job. Yeah,
Because I think about that with you and traveling too. Like I'm always curious of like working and teaching in different cultures because
yeah.
we process differently in different cultures. If that stretches you into having to think of Reiki in a variety of ways for the delivery.
Yeah, sometimes it's definitely different. Also, how we, as you say, how we absorb it in different cultures. Like I was just in Italy, the Italians are a little bit more like this, and then when you are in Germany, everybody's a little bit more like this.
Yeah.
No offense taken,
Yeah, yeah.
everybody, but it's just the way it is, and
Right.
it's I quite like that as well. And sometimes definitely I have to stretch my mind, but it's great too, and it's ultimately what we really have to look at is that our essence, that luminous, beautiful light, is neither Italian or German or Dutch or American. It's just luminous light,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the beauty. If we can start to see this beyond, again, these stories of my country
Right.
or my race or my whatever, man, woman, whatever we are, but that our essence actually is completely beyond all of these labels.
Yeah. Ah, so interesting. I also wanted to make sure to show this book as well, because this is a great one too. Reiki Insights. You have so many books, but if anyone is curious, of course, you can find all of Franz's books on Amazon, but be sure to go to his website so you can join his classes and learn more about all that he teaches and where he will be in the world. You're like, where's Waldo? But I want to thank you again for taking time to share with us today, Franz.
Thank you, Lana, for interviewing me. And it's absolutely great. Actually, the Reiki Insight and the Inner Heart of Reiki, and also a few of the other books I co-wrote with Bronwen, they're going to be republished with new covers, new jackets in the next few years. So that's
Oh,
also really
wow.
excited. Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay. Well, we'll have to look forward to all of that too. So don't get these covers stuck in your mind. Just
Yeah, that's
just
it.
look for the titles. Look for the titles. And we will see all of you very soon. Thank you, Franz.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. I just want to first of all again thank my teacher Franz for taking the time to share with all of us today. And just to clarify, the online course can be registered for through his website at ihreiki.com. And the name of the class is What is Reiki? And it's a brand new live event. It'll be for 7 days, 1 hour a day. And it's been created for existing Reiki teachers and practitioners of all lineages and all levels to take them deep into self discovery and the traditional Japanese teachings of the system of Reiki. So, this class again is 7 days. It begins on the 1st of July. The class starts at 12 p.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern. That's 8 p.m. for those of you in London. And again, that is an hour a day for 7 days. So I will put the link to register down in the show description. And in any case, you can learn more about Franz and his work there on the website, ihreiki.com. I thank you all so much for being here, of course. And if you want to learn more about me and my work, visit theenergeticalchemist.com. I will see you all very soon. Remember to always journey in love.